Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is a review of the 1977 creature feature monster movie, Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds. Now, before I get into my thoughts on the film, I want to give a special shout out to Bobby for requesting this movie. Thank you, Bobby, and I hope you enjoy this, and I also hope that you all enjoy this review as well. If you have any requests for any film or any topic that you want to suggest, you can donate to my PayPal. I'll have it in the video description down below. But anyway, let's get started. Let's start talking about Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds. Now, this is a movie that I had never heard of until this was requested, and I can kind of see why. This really ultimately was not a film I was that fond of, and not the kind of movie that I'm really that into. I'm still glad I gave it a shot, though, because from a visual perspective, this film is full of a lot of vivid and really incredible imagery. This is one of those movies that, from a technical standpoint, is terrific. It just falls flat and really sinks to the bottom of the ocean because of a lackluster story and equally as lackluster characters. It's one of those movies where it looks great. There are some sequences that are genuinely quite spectacular for the time, but it all rings very hollow because of the lack of consistent quality with two primary and key elements of a successful film or any successful story: strong, likable characters and a non-substandard, consistently engaging storyline. And I don't feel that this film really delivered the goods when it comes to those key particular factors. But it's not without its merits. The direction by Junji Kurata, I thought, like I said, I think this film is really impressive from a visual standpoint. A lot of that goes to the director, and I thought he did a fantastic job, a really good job directing this movie. I thought he had a fair number of unique camera tricks and techniques that he used for this film. I thought he really brought the setting and all of the atmosphere to life in a way that really made it pop when it comes to the visuals. I thought he had a great relationship with his cinematographers, and they really were quite a team. And yeah, and even the sequences that dealt with the effects, I thought that he did a good job directing them. So it's one of those movies that, like I said, from a technical standpoint, it's terrific. There are just other things that really aren't on the same level that ultimately bring it down. And one of the biggest things is the screenplay by Masaharu Igami, Isao Matsumoto, and Ichiro Otsu. So you have three writers, and they had 2 years to come up with this film. I think, well, maybe not 2, 1 year, because Toei, who produced this, they one of their main head. I'm trying to think of the right word for it. One of the main people who were at the head of production at the time, they actually saw Jaws in 1975, and they really liked it. And they thought, okay, what is it about this movie that makes it very popular to audiences? Because they wanted to take that and create something for Japanese audiences. And I think they got the wrong first impression. I think they just saw it as more of a spectacle. They saw it more for the gore and for the fact that you have a big monster, it's a big shark, but in this instance it's a plesiosaur, and then on top of that it's also a pterodactyl. But what makes Jaws so great is not the shark. And that's still a good element. That's still a great element, and a really strong element. But what makes Jaws great is its characters. That's what makes the film great, is the characters. And I feel that Toei completely missed the boat when it comes to that. I feel the screenplay missed the boat. I mean, your main lead guy in Setsu Serizawa, played by Tsunehiko Watase, is not a very likable guy. He doesn't really have much of a personality. Doesn't have much charisma. In all honesty, I thought he was a poor man's Sonny Chiba in a lot of ways in this. And it's not like he's like punching and kicking at the plesiosaur or the monster bird in this movie. And if that isn't bad enough, he's not likable for other reasons. Because he's a fucking abuser. There's a scene in this movie where he literally just smacks the lead girl around. I guess it was for the time. I guess that was something that wasn't considered problematic for the time, and I understand. And I'm not gonna try. I don't try to be the kind of person that wants to cancel movies based on social values that were not necessarily as popular as they are today. That being said, it still doesn't really help the character in any way. Even back then, it doesn't make the character any stronger. He just smacks this girl up and for what? And they're supposed to be lovers, and it just doesn't work. And that and other misfires of the script make it so the two lead characters, you don't really care that much about them, and then on top of that, they don't have any chemistry. There's no passion, so it's a passionless romance. And so it just the sequences with the romantic stuff just feel forced or feel like they're padding between Setsu and Akira. Or actually, I think it's Akio. Setsu and Akira. But yeah, and Takahashi. See, I'm confused because Takahashi is the name of the character in the plot synopsis on Wikipedia, but it's a different name on the cast, so I'm fucking lost. But anyway, these characters aren't particularly that strong. A lot of them bleed together because they seem like they're the same sort of character. And when it comes to Jaws, there are sequences in this that are straight up rip-offs of Jaws. There's a sequence that plays out almost exactly the same as the scene in Jaws, where there's some celebration going on at a lake, and there's a bunch of pranksters who are using like fake fins to make it look like the monster's in the lake, but it's not really the monster. Just like the sequence in Jaws where it's like everybody freaks out and everyone's like, get out of the water, but then you find out it's a false alarm. But then you find out later that it actually isn't because it actually is there. They tried to do the same thing here, and it didn't have nearly the same impact or the same effect. And then there's stuff with a mayor who isn't necessarily as much of a stubborn ass as Murray Hamilton is in Jaws, but it's just still the same sort of thing. But it kind of stops there when it comes to the Jaws comparisons, though. It doesn't really go all the way with that. So it's a film that feels like for a few sequences, feels like it's Toei's Jaws. And then in other sequences, it just feels like a very lackluster, mediocre, at best, monster movie. With some impressive production design, some nice art direction. I felt the monster and animatronic effects, the model work by Fuminori Ohashi, which was his final work before he retired, that I think it cost it like $20 million for the animatronics alone. I mean, 20 million yen, not 20 million for the animatronics. Can you imagine that? $20 million back in 1977? They should ask for their money back, because it definitely doesn't look like $20 million. No, 20 million yen, which is still a lot of yen for the time. And the effects for the time period, they look fine. There are some moments where things look a little chintzy, especially when the plesiosaur and the pterodactyl are on screen at the same time and are fighting one another. But there's other stuff like the destruction of Mount Fuji during the earthquake, and some nice early blue screen, green screen work, with rotoscoping. I thought that was actually pretty impressive. So there are moments in this film when it comes to effects that it really does shine. Uh, and I thought at least the design of the plesiosaur, at least there were a lot of scenes of the plesiosaur I particularly thought were well done. Although you could really tell it was, it's a rubber model, but I've seen a lot worse than what is presented in this movie. But the thing is, with the screenplay, you have these characters that aren't very likable, that don't have that much character development, so you don't really get that into them. The main guy's a fossil hunter, but he just does it in a way that isn't very. It's just very dull. It's not exciting, and the stakes aren't really that high with the story either. So it tends to really run out of steam very quickly. And then there's just a lot of stuff. It's like, why? Like, why should I care? Oh, there's an earthquake that could happen, or there's a monster that's eating people in a lake. Okay, I get it. But it doesn't even seem like the movie thinks it's that important. Because by the end of the film, like, essentially the volcano erupts and everybody dies. That's honestly how this movie ends. And on one hand, I give the film credit for going there, having the balls to end a movie like this that way. But on the other hand, it makes the film even worse, because it's a movie that already suffers from a lot of unmemorable and moments in it that are completely disengaging. And then you have the ending, which is like the epitome of not engaging the audience, because it's just like, I don't really, okay, everybody dies, all right, why would I want to watch that again? Didn't stop Russian audiences though, because in Soviet Russia this is one of the highest grossing films of all time. Go figure, right? But I also think it was like one of the few films that actually would. Yeah, it was the 19th highest grossing film of all time in the Soviet box office. And it was released in 1979 in the Soviet Union. But apparently, I think this is because there wasn't really that many films that made it to the Soviet Union, especially monster movies like this. So this was like something like unheard of for Soviet audiences. Something that they had never really seen before, or that much of. But I still thought it was an interesting bit of trivia. But yeah, the biggest sins of this screenplay is a lack of engaging, likable characters, a story that really kind of meanders around and gets lost in the seaweed and never really gets out of it because it gets too tangled up in different threads and different stuff that isn't really that interesting. It isn't really that captivating. And then you have the ending. But I'm not going to blame the actors. I don't really think that they really are. I don't think it's really their fault. Tsunehiko Watase, Shôtarô Hayashi, Nobiko Sawa, Tomoko Kiyoshima, Fuyukichi Maki. So, apologize. I'm really bad at pronouncing these names, so yeah, I don't really know what else to say about the performances. The performances, there really isn't anything that's like really bad. Like the dubbing is pretty bad. The English dub is pretty awful for this. But I don't think, like, from an acting perspective, they were really bad. It was a bad film when it comes to performances. But then again, I can't really tell for sure because I watched the version with the pretty atrocious English dub. Features music by Masao Yagi. The music is one thing about this that I also like too. It's definitely acquired taste, as is this entire movie. But I liked the funky 70s disco jazz kind of soundtrack. I didn't mind that. And I really do want to make it clear that this film does have some really gorgeous visuals. That really, in a lot of ways, remind me of a giallo type of movie, And that's why it's honestly really too bad that this was a pretty forgettable, boring monster movie for the most part. I mean, the dinosaur and the monster bird don't really fight until like the last 10 minutes, and the monster bird doesn't even show up until the last 20 minutes of the movie. Before that, it's just the plesiosaur every now and then. It's one of those movies that it starts out okay, like 30 minutes in, there's enough going on and things are kind of interesting enough that you want to see where it goes, but then after that, it just drowns. It just drowns in mediocrity and just blandness, and never really resurfaces and never really recovers. At least for me personally. But yeah, there's other, the cinematography by Sakuchi Shiomi and Shigeru Akuzuka, and just really impressive, gorgeous. There's a sequence where this one character, this girl, I think it was a scientist gal, who's like hangs out with one of the main. She's like friends with one of the main leads, and she gets killed by the plesiosaur, but it's kind of a delayed sort of thing where she gets bit in the leg and she starts bleeding out. And so there's a really gorgeous shot and a really great bit of editing too. A really nice transition by Isamu Ichida, where she's in the water, and because of the cut on her leg, the blood is just just really bright red blood is just filling up the water. It's just covering all of the bright blue with bright red, and her face is just above the water. And then there's this really great, like I said, it's a really great transition where her face in this bloody water transitions to the next scene. And so there's a lot of stuff like that in this movie from a technical standpoint that really are standouts. I just wish the characters were worth a shit. I wish the story was stronger, and it felt like the stakes were higher at the very least. But really, just better characters would have made this film at least above average for me. But the fact that the characters are just so bland and boring and unlikable, and that just brings the film down a lot. And I don't really know what else to say about the movie. It's one of those movies, like I said, where there's not a whole lot that happens. Like, there's something involving a stone egg, and the main guy wants to find it. And there was this girl who fell through the ground near Mount Fuji, and there's a sequence where she essentially sees what's inside one of these giant eggs. And that was actually a really well shot sequence, and some really great production design. I thought the look of the ice cave was really impressive, and I really liked that. And it's kind of building up to like this reveal of what this monster is going to be, and you eventually do get it. And there's some decent blood and guts, not really guts, but there's some decent gore in this. Not anything that's particularly spectacular, but there's some decent bits of Gru, but it's just one of those movies where, despite the fact that there are patches where there are some things that do occur on screen that are going to leave a mark, as a whole, it doesn't leave much of an imprint. And it's just one of those movies that, yeah, I checked it out. I saw it. I'm glad I did for the visuals and for some of the technical aspects of the movie. But it's not a movie that I really would run out and buy, let alone pay these crazy high prices for, like 60, 70, 80 bucks for a used DVD, or really want to watch again. But if it's a film that interests you, I would recommend checking out, because you never know. But it just wasn't really a film that I was really that into, I was really that big on. But that's just me personally. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.